Let's bring in Judicial Watch President Tom Fenton. Tom, it's always great to have you on there. So the Twitter staff that kind of evaluates the tweets came in and said, listen, we don't think the president did anything wrong. I want to read you these and kind of get your opinion. This is quoting from Barry Weiss here. It's pretty clear he's saying the American patriots, speaking about Trump, are the ones who voted for him and not the terrorists. We can call them that, right? From Wednesday. Going on, another staffer agreed. Don't see the incitement angle here. Finally, but Twitter executives did ban Trump, even though key staffers said that Trump had not incited violence, not even in a coded way. He was removed because there were a bunch of staffers who didn't want him on Twitter, and they bowed to that. Tom, your thoughts?
Yeah, they were, contrary to what you just read, the activists in Twitter considered Trump and his supporters to be terrorists, compared him to the Nazis. And, to turn a phrase from Alice in Wonderland, it was verdict first, evidence never. They changed the rules, and they came up with a new rule to ban Trump. They acknowledged there was no precedent for it, and it was only applying to him. But some of the earlier material also show that the FBI was asking Twitter to take down and censor the tweets of Americans. There are issues here that go beyond the corporate abuse that we're seeing evidence of, but now we have the FBI watching our Twitter feeds and potentially coming after us and getting us censored, which raises all sorts of additional legal questions.
It's amazing to me that the media, by and large, didn't cover any of these Twitter file drops, right? And yet Elon Musk goes after Fauci, and the left goes crazy, Tom. The media goes crazy. The Washington Post, their headline is the following here. Musk's ugly attack on Fauci shows how right-wing info warfare works. I mean, they won't cover the releases, right? But, man, you say something against their side, and you are done.
That's right. Musk said that there was evidence of election interference by Twitter. I didn't see the headlines there. But you criticize a powerful government official who's controversial, who's been credibly accused of misleading Congress and the American people about gain-of-function research, and has been largely unaccountable despite his bureaucratic power. And it's called dangerous. What's dangerous is suggesting that American citizens don't have a right to criticize powerful government officials and then to target them and punish them. The thinking is advertisers should leave Twitter because Musk dared to criticize Fauci. It's absurd.
And the thing is, you talk about, the whole COVID response, and you had Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who was he's a nonpartisan guy. He's not into politics. He's a doctor who was simply giving what he thought was the best advice, and they shut him down, and then the left went after him. Your final thoughts?
Well, the next batches, I hope, will be including the COVID files, which are the efforts by these agencies, including Fauci's agencies, to suppress information and criticism of their COVID policies. So I have a feeling Musk knows what's coming, and they're trying to push back on that because we're going to know more information about censorship, not only of election disputes, but also the COVID policies that have been so disruptive to America.
I got to go, Tom, but is there anything you believe that might compel the media to actually begin covering this?
I'd be interested to see media interest communicating with Twitter about their efforts to get people censored, which, as you know, that's kind of a beat along the media, which is the push for censorship of folks on Twitter and other social media platforms. I'd focus on that if I were Elon Musk.
Tom Fenton, always great to see you. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
We've got a perfect guest to start the show today, not only to talk about FTX, but and all that we've learned there in the last 24 hours, the censorship that the FBI has played on social media, but also some new revelations about the vaccine mandate and Ron DeSantis' decision to start a grand jury. Joining us right now, the president of Judicial Watch, Tom Fenton, whose group just a few minutes ago released explosive documents showing that there were early signs of problems, skeletal deformities in the testing of the COVID-19 vaccine. We got those documents from the FDA. Compliments of Judicial Watch. Tom, welcome to the show. Some pretty big news here.
It's pretty disturbing to see these records showing these vaccine tests on rodents, and the litters of some of the rodents, or significant numbers, and we can go through the percentages, but it's on our website, showed skeletal malformations. And the vaccine companies are saying, well, no big whoop. That's not necessarily tied to the vaccines. Others would suggest otherwise, that this is a warning sign about the safety of the vaccines. The point is, this debate should have been had last year when we first asked for this material, rather than it taking 18 months in a federal lawsuit to get this basic information out about the vaccines. Plus, there's more information in this material about how the RNA material ends up in other parts of the body, which, if you've been following this debate closely, we were assured was not the case when the vaccines were introduced to the public. So, I'm tired of the gamesmanship here. We can debate the safety and efficacy of the vaccines, but that only can take place when we have full information. And we still don't have full information, as we're seeing with this latest drop.
Yeah, amazing.
And something that I would really love to know, and I think our audience would too, is, with all of the questions surrounding COVID, the vaccines, the way that it was handled with lockdowns, mask mandates, all of that, with your story, who stifled it? Because, was it Anthony Fauci? Was it other players? And I know that you can't necessarily predict, but as far as what you're seeing and the direction it's going, who do you think it was who ultimately made the decision to suppress it?
Well, this is deep state. We think the deep state's Justice Department and the FBI, the CIA, et cetera. No, the deep state we've seen is the CDC, the FDA, NIH, HHS. So these public health agencies have been stalling the release of this basic information about this vaccine. And, I and others have been, Judicial Watch and others have been trying to get this information over their objections, information which typically would have been released more widely by now. But this is the most important medical treatment, arguably, in the history of modern man, these vaccines. And we just finding out basic information about how they were tested and what the results were.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And we're going to learn a lot more, I know, through Judicial Watch's good work and other things. I wanted to get your reaction to Ron DeSantis' decision to seek a grand jury panel in Florida to look at these issues. A lot of people threw up their hands and said, well, we gave everybody immunity in the early law, so nothing could be done. Ron DeSantis doesn't seem to accept that answer. How important is that development in Florida?
Well, it's going to be a big legal question as to whether these companies or anyone else has liability over the misleading information that we've too often have received related to these, what Justice Alito famously called irreversible medical treatments. And did federal law preempt Ron DeSantis or Florida state officials' ability to enforce consumer fraud and other statutes in a way that protects citizens there? That's going to be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah, no doubt.
Tom, I'm out here in California, and I love when I hear that Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch are probing something in California. You had a victory earlier this year pertaining to the corporate board quotas, and now you are seeking documents pertaining to the Paul Pelosi attack, which has seemed to be shrouded in mystery. And then there was a reporter out of San Francisco who was fired from their job for reporting what seemed like transparently. What's the status of that?
The status is we haven't gotten jack. We asked for the records and they told us no. We're still, quote, investigating it. But in cases like this, you typically do get at least some public information out of the police department, videos and such, and we haven't gotten any of it. What was interesting, though, in responding to us, I don't have the wording in front of me exactly, but the police official went out of their way to add information about there were only 2 people in the house or something like that, which is usually not given. Details like that aren't given in response to a FOIA request. So they used, rather than give us the documents, they told us a story, which is interesting in and of itself, but show us the documents, police officials in San Francisco.
Yeah. That's it. Show us the money. That's what we need to see. Tom, one thing we've gotten to see a lot of in the last week, some Twitter files, plus an extraordinary deposition from Elvis Chan, an FBI agent. The extent to which the FBI wasn't censoring Russian disinformation, censoring Russian, actual Americans' opinions. How concerning is it, the stuff that's now into the public realm?
Oh, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have confirmation the FBI were monitoring tweets of Americans about election debates and controversies, mail-in votes and such, and asking Twitter, it looks like successfully, to delete tweets of American citizens. The FBI has no business doing this. Every understanding I have is it's illegal for the FBI to be doing this. And I can just imagine, as I've been noting over recent days, just how big a scandal this is. If this is what we're seeing in one company, Twitter, which is the smallest of the big tech companies, can you imagine what they were doing over at Facebook and Google, which owns YouTube? There's a lot to be gotten at here. And kudos to Elon Musk for beginning the disclosure of this massive government, political, and corporate scandal.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, and the social media thing is particularly scary. I mean, especially for my generation, because we have grown up in the age of social media. And I don't know if any of us, not just my generation, but any Americans expected to ever see this level of censorship and suppression of free speech. And it seems like the impetus for it was social media. How do we roll it back?
Well, Musk is a good example of you just need leadership from one key person and you can make some significant progress. The question in the media world or the big tech world, are the other companies going to be pressured to do this? Legislatively, I think Congress can perfect Section 230 to make it clear it doesn't allow for political censorship. Or more easily, although the courts are probably been hesitant to do this thus far, properly interpret Section 230 to make it clear it's designed to help companies take off violence from their internet sites or pornography. It's not designed to give them an out to censor people and act as editors of people's thoughts about public policy debates.
Yeah, pretty extraordinary. And according to Musk, more interested in censoring political opinions and stopping child exploitation on the platform. Pretty interesting revelation there.
Yeah.
I want to
or just quickly, we can ban the government from asking big tech companies to take stuff down.
That's right.
We don't even have to debate changing the law.
That's right.
For how big tech companies operate. Just stop the government from censoring us.
So simple. So simple. About 30 seconds left. FTX looks like a big scandal. And what you see is if this man, according to the indictment, really began stealing money right from the beginning, aren't Democrats the ultimate beneficiary of up 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million of that?
Well, the public reports are he's the second biggest donor to the Democratic Party. And when you have new money come in large measures like that, you can bet those who are the beneficiaries do due diligence to figure out where the money's coming from. And I would like to know what they found out about where he was getting his money and how he was able to afford all of this. He says he gave money to the Republicans. There's no indication of that. Although the indictment today suggests that he was doing donations through straw donors, which is illegal, basically disguising the donations.
Have to watch that. Yeah, Tom, important stuff. We're rounding up on a commercial break. Folks, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Ben Carson joining us right after the break.
I talked about this a little bit last week. We have several kind of ongoing concurrent scandals now. We have the underlying scandal of what the Biden family was up to in terms of, and the emails and text messages suggest that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's other family members, brothers and such, were doing international business and potentially, it looks like, saving and holding back and for payment to Joe Biden the monies they were getting. And there's been dramatic evidence about emails related to a China deal, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit. So the other aspect of the scandal is that the FBI and Justice Department have had this information through since at least December of last year, and have evidently done nothing with it, and in fact probably have hidden it. And then the third corruption scandal associated with it is the media and big tech suppression of the story. Despite new revelations, despite further confirmation of the authenticity of the material, you still have the big media and big tech suppressing information about it in an effort to help Joe Biden and oust Donald Trump. And I'm not saying that you should vote for or against any candidate. I'm just saying that you shouldn't have information about candidates withheld from you by improper and fraudulent intervention by either big tech companies or the media. And so what Judicial Watch is aiming to do is to provide you information that you may not be able to find elsewhere, although thankfully, given our new media age and the new internet, and I know the internet's not new, but the fact that we can now access information outside the traditional gatekeepers, you probably know a lot about what I'm talking about. Now, remember, these documents are not FOIA documents. These documents are material that was in a few places. There's emails that have been released separately from one of Hunter Biden's business partners. There's emails from a gentleman, Mr. What was his name? Of course, I'm going to forget his name. Tony Bobulinski, who is a veteran and also a business partner of Hunter Biden and his colleagues, who has said he came forward after revelations in the last few weeks that essentially he was part of this a China deal that was being pushed by, it looks like, very, very senior folks in China to give millions and millions of dollars to Joe Biden's son. And Bobulinski says that the email about the big guy email that I've told you about, where Hunter says that he would hold 10% of some of that money for 10% of the money for the big guy, that was Joe Biden. And Bobulinski says when Joe Biden says he didn't know anything about Hunter's foreign business interests, he says that's not true. He personally witnessed Hunter and Joe talking about his businesses and regularly consulted with him on it. In fact, he says he met with Joe Biden for an hour talking about this China deal, which at least I think was happening in 2017. And this is on top of the Burisma scandal. So, what I was thinking about this, that, we knew and found out most directly about Hunter Biden getting all that money from Burisma and Joe Biden's efforts to coincidentally remove the prosecutor investigating Burisma. Yes, and there was an ongoing investigation into Burisma at the time. We knew about that thanks to the whistleblowing of President Trump. Now, the deep state was angry that that President Trump wanted accountability for what Ukraine was doing, both in terms of its interfering in a way to upend his candidacy and then his presidency, and also the corruption tied to the Biden and Burisma issue. And little did we know. I mean, we saw that they were willing to blow up the Constitution once he raised questions about that. Biden's defenders in the House and the Senate, the leftists and the Democrats. But now we know that the 83,000, whatever amount of money that Hunter Biden was getting per month, that was a side hustle for them, wasn't it? He got $3.5 million from the Russians, according to a Senate report. This China deal, it's not clear how much money was ever transferred. It looks like at least $5 million, maybe. But they were talking tens of millions of dollars, $10 million just for introductions in this China deal. And who knows how much other money has been sloshing around there. And of course, the texts and emails suggest that Hunter Biden and his family members were taking money from those deals and passing it through to their father, Joe Biden. Now, this was raised during the debate. Joe Biden's response was to suggest it was Russia disinformation, which is obviously silly. I know the media is pretending that's the case. There's no evidence of it. It's just more of the same type of smearing. You raise questions about corruption in the Democratic Party, now you're a Russian agent. That's the new rule of thumb for the left-wing media and its acolytes, or its allies, I should say, in places of power, like in the House and the Senate. It's unbelievable. You have Adam Schiff lying about it again. You have other members of the Senate lying about it again. They know it's not Russia collusion. They know it's not Russia disinformation. We've had the Fox News and the Wall Street Journal confirm the China email. And frankly, the contents of the laptop indirectly as a result. Now we know that the FBI has been embarrassed into questioning Mr. Bobulinski after his revelations. Why didn't they talk to him 6 months ago, 8 months ago? It's not like they didn't know what his name was. He had the information in the laptop. This is just like the Wiener laptop all over again. It's politically inconvenient data, and so the FBI covers it up. So, in Washington, D.C., being as obsessed in D.C. as we are about the political consequences of scandal and how it might impact the election, you've got this distortion going on where the cover up, and as I pointed out, the big tech censorship, which is fraudulent business practices where they're pretending to be neutral when they're not. They're political, and they target people based on politics, not in some neutral business principle that can be defended, frankly, in court. So the big focus is, as a result, on what are the political consequences of this? What's going to happen in the election? I don't know. Personally, I suspect President Trump will probably win again. I'm not saying that because you should vote for or against President Trump or vote for or against Mr. Biden. I'm not advocating someone's election, just giving you a guess as to what I think will happen. But in many ways, this is kind of like the Clinton email scandal again, isn't it? Doesn't it remind you of that? I just, that, and the consequence of the Clinton email scandal was that that we uncovered that Trump. The consequence of the Clinton email scandal was a significant contributing factor, to put it mildly, to the president of the United States, Donald Trump, being put into the presidency by the American people in 2016, and we'll see if there's this new corruption issue results in similar outcome in his reelection. I don't know, but I'm going to be a little bit more positive about what the outcome is here, because people have asked. I was just in an interview with my friend Charlie Kirk for his podcast, and he said, "What do you think is going to happen legally if Biden wins on this issue?" And it occurred to me that it may not be, look, they are going to try to shut down any criminal investigation of Joe Biden in a Biden administration. I know that will be the case. They will try, and they will probably succeed. But it isn't going to be as easy as you think. It isn't going to be as easy as you think. So just because Joe Biden may win the presidency, it will not shut down any criminal investigation targeting him. We still do have a government that is answerable to the American people. It's run by politicians who are afraid of the voters, more or less. They don't want to be turned out of office. So if there is a serious criminal investigation of Joe Biden, and that's a big if, I don't know if he's going to be able to shut it down easily. I don't know. I'm not naive in the sense that they'll do anything significant against him, but it could dog him for some time. And past experience is the best indicator of future results when it comes to these investigations. So Joe Biden's likely to be protected no matter who becomes the president, whether President Trump is reelected or Biden is reelected. But it's not risk-free for him. So the FBI, for instance, investigating his business partner. I mean, if you listen to what Rudy Giuliani is talking about, and of course, Rudy has been right on this. I shouldn't call him Rudy. He's the mayor. I call him the mayor. Has been so right on this. He's been blowing the whistle on this, and for his pains, his patriotism, he's been attacked viciously. He's been targeted with threats of jail and being called a Russia agent, all sorts of smears, because he was blowing the whistle on this corruption for 2 years. And he was righter than right. President Trump was righter than right. I mean, heck, I knew there was something big with Biden. I knew, but I didn't know what was so big, because I saw the reaction that they were willing to blow up the Constitution with this coup attack on President Trump after he just raised some reasonable questions about what Biden was up to in Ukraine. And I thought the overreaction suggested there was something much bigger there. And sure enough, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Ukraine was just one of many countries that they were involved, that was a part of the, looks like, the grift for the Biden family. So is the FBI going to do anything? I don't trust the FBI to do anything. Is the Justice Department going to do anything? I don't trust the Justice Department to do anything. This is why I think the president should appoint a separate special counsel, not in the Justice Department, not in the FBI. There are other law enforcement agencies in the government at the federal level that can perfectly investigate this. They don't need the FBI to investigate this. You could have DHS investigate it. You could have the Postal Service investigate it. They've got an inspector. They got a criminal investigative unit that can investigate this. I don't trust the Justice Department and the FBI to do it. They've kind of proven that they can't be trusted. And it doesn't mean that Attorney General Barr is corrupt. Doesn't even necessarily mean that Wray is corrupt. It just means institutionally they will not satisfy and me at least, and I know millions of Americans I speak for, that any investigation will be legit because of their prior corruption and the failure of those agencies to hold those responsible for that corruption accountable till now. So if I were the president, I'd recommend I'd appoint a special counsel. So that's we'll see what happens with the Joe Biden scandal. Now, Judicial Watch, of course, is on it. We already have cases and lawsuits about Joe Biden and Burisma. For instance, we uncovered that Hunter Biden went to 29 countries. We uncovered that through a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. And what's interesting in these emails, because we had asked for additional documents about his travels, we didn't get them, so we sued. And the Secret Service said, look, we don't have Secret Service records after, I forget which month in 2014, suggesting that Biden had given up his Secret Service retinue and protection at that time, which raised additional questions. What was he doing why did he give it up if he did? Now these emails suggest that he didn't give it up, that the Secret Service was still providing protection for him. So we may go back to the court and reopen our case. I tell you, what's awful about these corruption issues is that you can't trust the agencies that interact with corrupt government officials as a result, because there's this almost reflexive effort to cover up on their behalf. And I don't know if that's happening here at the Secret Service, but we're going to look into it based on the new emails that we've uncovered. And of course, we immediately sent out FOIAs and are sending out Freedom of Information Act requests on the new revelations here with respect to China and Biden laptop generally, and the FBI and Justice Department's mishandling. So Judicial Watch is on the case, whether or not the Justice Department and FBI do what is required under the law. And don't expect them to have anything done before Election Day. They're not going to do it. They've made the decision to protect him. The big question I have, you may recall, I think it was back in May of this year, Attorney General Barr said that he didn't see anything that they're going to be investigating Obama or Biden for. Well, did he know about the Hunter Biden laptop at the time? If not, why not? So it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting period of time here.
Joining us now is one of the most important people in the conservative movement, one of the most influential, and one of the most, let's just say, powerful is one way to say it, but they are so results driven and oriented, and I love them. It's Judicial Watch. Tom Fitton joins us right now. Tom, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Charlie, good to be with you. Appreciate the good word.
I mean it. So, Tom, walk us through your analysis of the Twitter files. Most specifically, what, if any, laws were broken by our federal government?
Oh, well, there were, I think, 4 batches of Twitter files put out there. And as it relates to government intervention in Twitter censorship activities, you have 2 categories. You had these regular meetings taking place with the FBI and DHS and who knows, the Office of Director of National Intelligence prior to the election. And they've been cagey as to what those meetings were about. But the context around that time, obviously, was the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, but not only Twitter, but by Facebook and others. So the question is, were they telling or suggesting Twitter to take this material down? It's not clear that happened, but certainly regular meetings with a private company to persuade or talk about deleting or censoring any material would raise significant First Amendment concerns just generally. But more recently, one of the more recent batches, I think it was either batch 3 or batch 4, you saw that the FBI specifically asked tweets be taken down. And that to me raises significant legal concerns. You know, I'm no lawyer, but I've been doing this too long been doing this longer than I care to admit to in terms of figuring out what the FBI is supposed to do and what it's able to do. And what it's not able to do is to track the social media accounts of individual Americans for just because they don't like what they're saying about election debates, and then go to a private company and get them to take it down. That ought to be the subject of a serious criminal investigation. The victims of that type of activity may have civil claims against the FBI and anyone else involved in this. And I just saw on Just the News over with our friend John Solomon, he highlighted the deposition testimony in the Missouri and other lawsuits about Twitter censorship or big tech censorship of this FBI special agent, Mr. Chan, out in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And he said these censorship requests were being approved at the highest levels before they went to places like Twitter. Yes. So that's a real major revelation, and there ought to be heck to pay.
Yeah. So Tom, you were one of the leading voices, and Judicial Watch was one of the only organizations to uncover the nonsense around Russiagate. I believe it was your lawsuit that actually got us the Peter Strzok Smirk text messages. I could be wrong, but I know you guys were involved in some of the discovery there and some of the FOIA requests. But the same blueprint, the same behavior that they used for Russiagate seems that they now used for Twittergate in 2020, which is we are going to use the intelligence agencies to then have third-party actors, whether it be Perkins Coie, whether it be a dossier, whatever it might be, they're still calling the shots, but they do it a step removed. So, Tom, failure to hold people accountable for what they did with Russiagate, I think, is directly correlated with this behavior that we saw with Twitter.
Yeah, and in this case, you had the Trump administration kind of taking a step back. And it does go back to Russiagate, because the Trump administration or folks within the Trump administration were scared as a result of the ferocious attack on Trump over 2016 and his election. And they bought into hook, line, and sinker the idea that the Russians colluded and interfered in our election in a substantial material way. And in response to that, they took it upon themselves to police the internet and start evidently here targeting Americans for censorship through Twitter and such. And so these are deep state actors who made up crap against President Trump and then used the resulting political blowback to continue to censor Americans they didn't like. And one of the dangers is that it escalated, that they did it on the sly in 2020, but now they're doing it in a forthright manner under the Biden administration, where you have the White House calling in the heads of these big tech companies and being quite blatant and brazen in asking them to censor Americans about issues that get in the way of their political agenda.
want to play a piece of tape here of Yoel Roth, the degenerate boy king who was the de facto CEO of Twitter and had the power that czars, Caesars, dictators, and despots hundreds of years before would have only dreamed of. The ability to shut people up and manipulate news cycles and be able to really configure what people's opinions are about pressing issues. Let's go to this one here. Yoel Roth saying in the weeks between Election Day and January 6th, Twitter moderated 140 individual tweets just from Trump, and now we know it was the FBI that was pushing him to do it. Play cut 4.
In the weeks between Election Day and January 6th, Twitter moderated hundreds. I think the final number ended up as like 140 separate tweets from just at real Donald Trump that violated various policies.
Yes, he was good at that.
Integrity policy.
Yeah.
And so he's bragging about the volume of censorship. Tom, your thoughts?
The documents show he's not telling the truth. The challenge that Twitter had was that Donald Trump was not in violation of its rules, and they had to come up with new reasons and pretexts to censor him. And ultimately, they came up with a rule that applied only to him, Donald Trump. He was censored not because of what he said. It was because he was Donald Trump, and they opposed him for years. You see this in the material. So they weren't moderating his content. They were opposed to his content and figuring out ways and making up rules on the fly to censor it. So you had this outrageous election interference prior to 2020, and then he's in a political fight about how the election's going to be resolved, that those disputes are going to be resolved. They were upset about what happened on January 6th. But the problem was he hadn't done anything that was in violation of their rules. And you can see they acknowledged that, but they said, well, we're going to take these tweets down, or we're going to suspend his account because of what he's been saying for 4 years. Incredible. And I want to go back to you, Charlie, because I think they were lying about you.
They were
lying about Dan Bongino. And
yes.
I tell you, it's one thing to lie to you. And, I don't know, I'm sure you'll be consulting lawyers as to what actions you can take.
We are.
But when they lie to shareholders, when they lie to federal agencies,
yes.
and when they lie to Congress, and they lie to users about how they're censoring people, that raises a whole host of other legal issues outside of criminality by the government, but potential misconduct, both civil and criminal,
that's exactly
by
right.
the prior Twitter management.
So we're running out of time here, Tom. I know we have you for one more segment. I want to ask in the next segment, just out of curiosity, I mean, we could kind of almost explore this on air. How do citizens hold their government accountable when the government acts like criminals? That's a super important question, because how do you check and balance the FBI that does something nakedly illegal? That's one of the things that Judicial Watch is focused on. And maybe Judicial Watch can represent me. I'd love it. We could talk about that privately. And I think we got a good case, though. I mean, they were being pressured by the federal agencies to shut our account up. Do not amplify was the threat tag that we received. Tom, stay right there. Judicial Watch is terrific. We love it. Tom Fitton is with us. So, Tom, you mentioned crimes committed by our government. I believe one of the reasons why we are seeing people on the conservative side get angrier and angrier is we see citizens have to be indicted and put in prison for crimes they did not commit. They have to see their apartments raided for things they did not do. James O'Keefe, Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump. The list goes on. And yet we see blatant, naked, proud criminality by our government. What can possibly be done to hold the crimes of the government accountable?
Well, we have to use the tools available to us under the law and the Constitution for accountability and a check. And there are a variety of tools ranging from impeachment, from Congress to funding the fights in Congress. Also, you have civil claims that individual citizens can bring. And hopefully there are honest administrative employees, people in the executive branch in the law enforcement area, who are willing to look at their own. But as we know, that's been almost a fool's gold in terms of looking for that to happen. because the Justice Department and the FBI, in my view, are irredeemably compromised. And we need to think about how we start over in terms of organizing them, or in the case of the FBI, maybe even disbanding them and figuring out other ways to enforce federal law through an investigative agency.
You guys have done a little bit of this. You've done it a lot. I should say, but some of it's been successful. Where the American people can technically go to the courts and say, "My government is breaking the law." But those are tough lawsuits, aren't they? They take time, they take money, and the government almost always seems to get away with it.
Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. You win some, you lose some. In California, they have this broad liberal standing position that taxpayers can challenge illegal conduct by the government, misuse of tax dollars for illegal activity. And they had quotas in California they were trying to impose on private boards of directors, and we went and sued under this theory of taxpayer standing, and we won. So there are opportunities even in blue states to enforce the rule of law, and certainly the example of Judicial Watch is we're famous for FOIA, right, Charlie?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just think about that. Let's take a step back. We've got this gargantuan Leviathan government, billions and billions of dollars. But if they don't give Judicial Watch documents, those government agencies have to go into court when we sue and explain to the court why they're not giving us the documents or when they're going to give them to us. And they have to explain if they're withholding anything, why it is they're withholding it. And I mean, that's an awesome leveling of power between the American people and their government. So this is why the left hates the rule of law. So, those things that seem challenges to us, we know what needs to be done, and we should embrace what the left is attacking. Embrace the rule of law, embrace the idea that the courts provide some check on the system, embrace Congress's powers under the Constitution to not spend money where it's being used and misused and abused. And of course, embrace our core constitutional rights, which are God-given. The Constitution actually just codifies what God has granted us, as such as the First Amendment rights to free speech, association, and to petition our government. That's all part of the First Amendment. The left would have you believe, would have you forget about those two second ones, the association and the petition your government. That's a core right too, which is what this whole Twitter fight's been about. They don't want us to criticize the government.
That's right. Well, I think there needs to be a flurry of lawsuits very soon. And I'm not sure what the success can be, but it needs to be repudiated and not tolerated if a government agency by proxy uses a private company to do what they themselves specifically cannot do. 30 seconds.
We got a lawsuit already underway in California against the Secretary of State's office there. They were getting Twitter to take down tweets, but specifically with Judicial Watch, they got YouTube to take down a video of mine about Judicial Watch's work, Judicial Watch video, just before the election. And so we sued the Secretary of State's office for that violation of our civil rights. So we're not standing idly by and just complaining about it. We're going to court to figure out what went on and hold them accountable where we can.
That's what we need to do. Tom, thank you so much. Keep up the great work with Judicial Watch. And if you want to represent me, just shoot me a text. So
we'll talk. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.